They say the heart wants what it wants. But what if what it wants could destroy everything? Nora wasn't always this way. Restless, hungry for more. Once upon a time, she was the kind of woman who found joy in the little things, the laughter of her children, the warmth of her husband's arms after a long day. But comfort has a way of turning into chains when dreams are left to wither. It started with a glance. A man in a tailored suit with a smile too charming to ignore. Damien. Wealth dripped from his fingertips. Power echoed in his voice. And for the first time in years, Nora felt seen. "You deserve more," he whispered. "Why settle for less?" And just like that, her mind started to wander. What if he was right? What if there was a whole other life waiting for her? A life where she wasn't just a wife or a mother, but a queen. So one night she packed her bags. No goodbyes, no explanations. She left behind the scent of her daughter's shampoo, the warm hand of her son holding hers at bedtime, the quiet love of the man who once promised to stand by her side. She walked out, chasing a dream. But dreams have sharp edges. The first few months were golden. Parties under chandelier lights, vacations in places she never imagined. Luxury wrapped around her like a second skin. But there was something else. Something darker beneath the surface. Damien smiled, but not with his eyes. His words dripped sweetness, until they didn't. "You're mine now," he said one night, his voice low, dangerous. And that's when she realized the cage she left was nothing compared to the one she had just walked into. At first, it was subtle. "Don't wear that." Then it became louder. "You talk too much." And finally, it was silent. The kind of silence that chokes, the kind that makes you forget who you are. Nora tried to leave. Once. But there are some doors you can't open when you're not holding the key. She learned that the hard way. Months passed. She smiled for the cameras. She played her role perfectly. But at night, she stared at the ceiling, wondering if anyone still remembered her. Back home, her children did. Her daughter would sit by the window, waiting. Her husband stopped wearing his wedding ring. The world moved on, but they never did. One night, Nora found a letter tucked in her suitcase, something her son had written before she left. It was simple. "Mom, I hope you find happiness, but I hope it brings you back to us." And that's when it hit her. Happiness wasn't something you chased. It was something you built. And she'd left hers behind. With trembling hands, she packed her bags again. But this time, it wasn't so easy. Damien wasn't the kind of man who let things go. "You think you can leave?" He laughed. "You belong to me." But this time she wasn't afraid. Because there are some things more powerful than money. Love, family, freedom. And when a woman has nothing left to lose, she becomes unstoppable. Nora didn't walk out this time. She ran. And when she finally made it home, standing on the doorstep with tears streaming down her face, her son opened the door. He didn't say a word. He just smiled. Because sometimes forgiveness doesn't need words. And as she held her children close, breathing in the scent she once took for granted, she realized something. The price of freedom is high, but the cost of losing yourself is even higher. Because sometimes, the life you're searching for is the one you already have. But happy endings are rarely so simple. Coming home wasn't the finish line, it was only the beginning. Nora thought love would be enough, that hugs and apologies could stitch back the broken pieces. But life doesn't work that way. Her husband, Daniel, smiled when he saw her, but it didn't reach his eyes. He let her in, but not fully. They talked, but not deeply. And at night, they slept inches apart, feeling like strangers in their own bed. Her daughter, Chloe, hugged her tightly. But there was a hesitation, the kind that forms when trust has been cracked. the kind that makes a child wonder if you'll walk out again. And her son, Liam, he just stared. No tears, no anger, just silence. Nora tried to pick up where she left off, cooking dinner, helping with homework, laughing at Daniel's jokes. But the house no longer felt like home. It felt like she was visiting, a guest in the life she once had. One night, she overheard Chloe whisper to Liam, "Do you think she'll leave again?" And that broke her heart more than anything Damien ever did. She wanted to scream, to tell them how sorry she was, how she thought she was chasing happiness, only to realize it was here all along. But apologies only mean so much when the wound is still bleeding. She realized something crucial. It's not enough to come back. You have to stay. And staying means facing the mess you left behind. But life has a cruel sense of timing. Just when Nora started to rebuild, Damien came back. A single text. "You really thought you could run?" It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. At first, she ignored it, deleted the message, blocked the number. But a man like Damien doesn't need a phone to find you. 2 days later, a bouquet of black roses arrived at her doorstep. No note, no signature, just a reminder. Fear crept in like a shadow, and this time Nora wasn't running for herself. She was running for them. She considered telling Daniel. But how do you tell the man whose heart you broke that the past is clawing its way back? How do you ask for protection from someone you once walked away from? So she stayed silent, pretended everything was fine. But the cracks were showing. One night, Daniel confronted her. "You're not really back, are you?" he said. "You left something behind. Or someone." And in that moment, the walls came crashing down. She told him everything. The parties, the control, the fear, the text, the roses. And for the first time in a long time, she saw something familiar in his eyes. Not anger, not betrayal, but protection. "I'm not losing you again," he said. And this time, she believed him. But Damien wasn't the kind of man who gave up. And the next time he reached out, he didn't send flowers. He showed up. It happened on a quiet evening. The kids were asleep. Daniel was out getting groceries. And when Nora opened the door, there he was. Charming smile, cold eyes. "You think you can leave me?" he said, stepping inside. "You don't walk away from me, Nora. You belong to me." She backed away, heart pounding. But this time, she wasn't the woman who left. She was the woman who came back. And there's a strength in returning. A strength Damien never expected. "You're wrong," she said, her voice steady. "I don't belong to anyone." Daniel came home just in time to see them standing there, Damien towering over her, anger flickering in his eyes. But this wasn't a fight for fists. It was a fight for freedom. And when you have something to lose, you fight harder. They didn't need the police. They didn't need violence. They just needed each other. And that night, Damien walked away. Because power is only as strong as the fear behind it. And for the first time, Nora wasn't afraid. But the real battle wasn't Damien. It was healing. And healing doesn't happen overnight. It took months for Liam to hug her again without pulling away. It took years for Daniel to trust that she was here to stay. And it took a lifetime for Nora to realize that happiness isn't found in mansions or money. It's found in the messy, imperfect, beautiful moments you almost lose. But fight like hell to get back. And every time she tucks her kids in at night, every time Daniel holds her hand at the dinner table, she remembers one thing. Freedom isn't running away. It's choosing to stay. Because sometimes the greatest journey is finding your way back home.